I have been getting a lot of questions about moss poles lately and how often I water them, the general care. Here are a few things that I would like to share. First of all, and more condensed you have the moss, the longer it's going to stay damp. If it's really airy and lots of pockets in there, it's going to dry out a little quicker. And I've been adding different substrates to the moss because that can get expensive to use good moss and to fill it up. So I've also started messing with adding cocoa chips and perlite to the moss. When you combine these, you want to make sure they soak, they're completely wet, and then you wring them out before you build the moss pole. And this is what that combination looks like put together. And he's doing well too. A couple other things is they recommend Grow Thickly says to use Scotch tape to help hold it into place, but you can use orchid clips or anything else. You want to make sure that that node is tucked against the wet moss. That helps. I like to use grafting tape. You can get it in a pack just like this. It's not actual tape, so it doesn't stick to anything. But when you wrap that around the nodes, when you wrap that around the aerial roots, it creates a humidity barrier. And it's also going to help keep the moss more damp. Which is another thing. These D-shaped moss poles from Grow Thickly, they are only open in small areas. So a lot of that's closed off. It's going to keep it moist, keep it damp. Once your moss pole is damp, you're going to want to check every once in a while. You can just stick your finger in there and see if it's wet or not. Once you notice it's starting to dry out, I use this. I use one of these, do not drink, because sometimes I have food in there. And I go through and I just water enough just to get that moss wet. And turn it around. Make sure that water is going through on the other side and I can see that it's getting water through. The other thing is to take it to the top. You can see the water running through now. So I keep a couple of these loaded up in my plant room. There's the other one over here. And as I notice plants dry out, I'll just grab this and shoot them. If I use that bottle often, the moss poles usually stay pretty damp. But if I'm on vacation and gone for a week, don't have a lot of time, one of the other things I like to use is a spray bottle. As for how often to water, the key is to just never let them dry out completely. If it's starting to get dry, give it a little squirt. If you started off with super damp moss, that little squirt's usually enough. But now you can see how this is getting dry. You can always take your moss pole to the shower to get it re-soaked. Another tip is it's always easier to add more moss to the moss pole later than it is to keep moss wet that you're not using. So all of this right here, you don't need to fill this up if you're not going to use it anytime soon. So for slower growing plants, just fill it up to right above where that next node's going to grab. And I'm not going to take the taller ones down. I've gotten good at spraying them from a distance. Yes, it can make a mess. Yes, I understand my boys better now when they were potty training. But I have a lot of moss pools, and that's what works for me.